consultant. Tracy also has an MBA in international finance and is a merchant marine officer with a 100-ton USCG captain's license. On a personal level, Tracy spent most of his youth in New Zealand, where he learned to love the sea and the water. He's married to Krista, and they have 7 children. In 1999, he and his wife sold their home in Utah, purchased a 60-foot sailboat, and named it the Leahona, and embarked for the Caribbean, where they spent the next several years. During that time, Tracy advised the Port Authority of Jamaica on the building of a new mega yacht marina in Port Antonio, a marina which he also ran during its initial 18 months of operation. The Prows family currently lives in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We'd like to present Tracy with this gift for taking the time to share his stories and his wisdom with us. So if you can please join me in welcoming Tracy.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. When I was first asked to do this, I was all smiles, and now I'm only half smiles. I was asked to do this like late last year, and in January, I started to have some numbness in my face, and it turned out to be a stage 4 cancer. So in about 3 months ago, they cut my throat and cut all the nerves out, so I can't whistle or wink or blow out candles anymore. So if you're wondering why, that's why. So I am really honored to be here, though. I first started New Zealand, university in New Zealand, and the difference between BYU and the other universities in the world is just amazing. When I come here, I just think it's such a fantastic blessing. And I was grateful to start my career here too, and it's been great. We were planning on leaving for a mission to the Gilbert Islands and the Marshall Islands, but we got a little bit delayed here. But I was thinking, we've got more time. I'm just still young. But I wonder sometimes, really, if we do have more time. This quote's by Buddha. And I've learned one thing. You never know when you're going to get your ticket punched. And these days, bucket lists seem to be pretty popular. But I want you to think right now for a minute what you got in your bucket. How much have you got in your bucket so far? And if you only had, the doctor told me I only had a 30% chance of living for the next 5 years. And he also said, by the way, you might die on the table if I have to dig too deep. And I thought, well, don't dig too deep, but... what could you do in 5 years? How much of your bucket list you could do? Probably if you tried to do your whole bucket list, you'd probably kick the bucket. But we don't really have as much time as we think we do in life. And so today I want to encourage you to... I think that most people will die with a lot of songs unsung. And I want to encourage you to sing up. Start singing now. Because, we don't take a lot with us other than, what we take with us to the next life. I'm going to share my life so far. My voyage isn't any better than yours. It might be a little bit different. My life has been inseparably connected with my Father in heaven and my good wife and children and my parents who are here. And we're all on different sailing plans. A lot of times you make a sailing plan before you go to sea. I think I got invited because there's this article in the Deseret News about raising our children. And maybe I'm the comic relief of the program, of the conference here, because it's no taxes, no debits, no credits. And the only credit you will get is continuing boating education, so I don't know if that goes for me. I'm excited for the next tax update in the next session. Anyway, my son Ben told me that we had 17,000 responses from this article, and I was reading them. I was really entertained. This one guy says, "Gee, where did these guys go for vacation? Magna, Utah?" I suppose. Anyway. I was accused of being irresponsible and reckless and everything else in some of the comments, but a lot of people just wanted to know how we did it and what we did. So I'm not trying to sell you on sailing. As you know from the little videos there, we are kind of excited sailors. And as my wife reminded me this morning, we're probably the only ones that don't drink. This guy said, "You're the only sailor I've ever met that doesn't drink." And when we'd go into a harbor, they'd say, "You're either a Catholic or a Mormon, aren't you?" And I'd say, "Yeah, one of those." And of course, we were a little bit of an anomaly with all the kids swinging off the ropes, and everyone's wondering what's going on. I don't know if you've ever thought your house was a pain in the butt to keep going, but it was. The boats are too. I spend a lot of time. The only difference between what I do and what you do probably is that I get to do it in beautiful tropical islands. So it's not all Pirates of the Caribbean, that's for sure. I grew up in New Zealand. My mom and dad took me down there when I was 12 until after my mission. I started a mission down there, and I worked on the church sheep farm around the temple there and milked the cows and did all the terrible work for 50 cents an hour. I learned and grew to love the Maori people and the New Zealanders who, even though they're a small country, they didn't realize that they couldn't be the best rugby players in the world and the best sailors in the world, even though they are. And I wanted some kind of experiences for my children, my family, to something like that. And I tried to do it. I was blessed to be led to a good wife. Here, I don't know if you can see that. My wife had some passions that kind of warmed us up. She wanted a Victorian home on a small farm. She read Mother Earth News a lot, and so we wanted to see what we could do. This was our first home that we bought in Bear River City, and that's when she was through with it. I think she'll admit that the easiest childbirth she ever had was the one just before she, all alone, drywalled the vaulted ceilings in the second floor. I'm not sure I'd recommend that, but anyway. So we spent 16 years raising our children in Bear River City. We have 8 children. We buried one in Bear River City. And that was probably one of my first challenges growing up. And I learned that it really was the oil that we have in our lamp or our spiritual resources that get us through the challenges that we have in life. My wife was kind of a mountain woman. She's telling me to move on real quickly here, but one day she told me she found 120 acres up in the mountains right by Monte Cristo up behind Logan. And so she wanted to build a cabin there, and I can manhandle the logs. I could make a log cabin. I could get any machinery down there. So she figured out a way to do a cordwood wall. Those are 1-foot pieces, and we build a cabin. And she'd take the kids off in the week, in the middle of the week, and work, and then I'd come up on the weekend after work. And I think that this was a stepping stone, along with our house, in learning to take more challenges. And I think you also have stepping stones in your life, I'm sure, raising children and so forth, and they hopefully get harder and harder. I think harder is good, and it was good for all of us. My passion was to sail back to New Zealand and probably on around the world if I could. My enthusiasm grew, and once I started doing some auditing for a CPA firm, it even grew more because I thought that was the most monotonous and tedious thing I'd ever done. And I wondered how I ever took that major in college, but I stuck it out for a little bit and then went on to systems. But I first went to sea on a boat in New Zealand called the Spirit of Adventure, and it was in kind of a training ship. It's what you call a schooner because it has two masts and they're about the same size, and it was a square rigger, so that the top sails are square. So it's not like the other boats that I'll show you here in a little while. And it was the first time for a lot of things in sailing. And you know, while I was thinking about this, I remember once there was a chemistry teacher at the church college in New Zealand where we were there, and this chemistry teacher decided to build a sailing boat. He built what's called a ferroconcrete boat, where you take a wire mesh in the shape of your hull, and then you fill it up with cement. So you have a cement hull, and yeah, it does float. And I remember we were out in the Bay of Islands at some point, and we were playing on the rocks, or playing in a little dinghy, and we noticed this boat, that was obviously an American's boat, was kind of drifting towards the shore. And it was drifting closer, and then we noticed there was no one on it, and we were only like 13, 14. Anyway, the chemistry teacher had a young son, a little nerd guy, super guy, who's now a brilliant man. And he saw it, and he just didn't even hesitate, and he swims out to this boat, climbs on the back, starts the engine up and reverses it and saves it from going off on the rocks. And it kind of impressed me. And I thought, gee, if Warren can do it, maybe I can do it. But there was just something about these kids that are growing up on boats and that were around them that was a little bit different. My kids are a little bit different, I suppose. So I did everything I could. I started cranking up with this dream and this passion. I collected charts for the whole world. I colored them in, and they were photocopies because I couldn't be sailing, so all I did was color charts. And I studied, memorized the winds, the currents, boat design, the best places, to go. When you go from what they call the milk run from the Galapagos down into the islands, you go at a certain time, and then you get the trade winds, and it goes with, you don't sail against the weather, that's called, against the weather is going into the wind. So I got my master divers and my Coast Guard license and sailing endorsement and all that kind of stuff. And the most difficult thing I did was kind of try and subtly put these ideas into my wife's brain that we should get out of the mountains. And we started chartering some boats, which means renting them. And in the Bay of Biscayne, there's Miami way up there, and this is Biscayne Bay. It's a beautiful bay to sail in, and then when you come down through here, then you start going down through the Keys in Florida. So there's Miami in the back, and in the 70s, there's a shallow area that they started to build houses on. They called it Stiltsville. And there was like an orange light in two places in the bay, and you got to make sure that you know which one's which. Otherwise, you go off on the reef, right in a reserve that has really heavy fines. And my wife was a little upset that I did that. Especially because we couldn't get off, and we had to have like a $2,000 tow off, and then we had to pay for the bottom of the boat that got all scraped up. So, it didn't come like really easy, and some of the skill sets take a little while to go, but then I kind of realized that I got seasick on the boat, and that kind of blew the wind out of my sails. But we figured out a way to get out of it. So, the doubt started to leak into my bilges, and I think my wife was even doubting even more. The kids were just there enjoying it, and they thought their dad knew what he was doing, I think. I don't know. But it was probably a little comical watching me to get through, but you know, sailing is not that hard. That's not the hardest part. Took me 15 years, but I finally got her convinced to sell the cabin and the house and everything, and one day she called up, she said, hey, I think there's a boat for sale down in Florida that will fit all our kids. And so we went down there and we took it out for a sea trial. While we were out there, the engine's killed and the steering wheel fell off, and I was wondering what. But that saved us about $30,000 that I beat the guy down on. And as I look down, you know, look back at it, our knowledge is pretty limited, but you know, it's the passion that pulls you through on these things and wanting to do this. To this day, I think my wife thinks it was just a midlife crisis, but maybe it was. She has a master's degree in outdoor recreation from here, and it turns out that that's a great, actually when I met her, I wasn't really sure what that degree was worth, but it turned out to be really good in the end. I mean, she's a perfect first mate, and she really takes care of us. I think she kind of got tired of my navigation by the seat of the pants. I mean, I would use the GPS and stuff, so she taught herself dead reckoning, where she would go take the paper charts and plot our positions and everything, so if something happened to the electronics, then we knew where we were. I remember one time we were coming to Ocho Rios in Jamaica, and there's a breakwater that keeps the waves from coming in the harbor, and you have to count 4 lights, green lights, and then that's the end of the breakwater, and you come around. And I counted them, but not too good, and I was going to go around number 3, and she yelled out, let me know I was in the wrong place, so I had to throw her into reverse and get all the way around. And that's another one of those things that we never forgot, but thankfully she helped, and it's been, I couldn't have done it without the first mate, obviously. Can I trade glasses? Thank you, thank you. I have to manually blink every now and again. Okay, so for about 2 years, we also chartered the boat. So we let a company charter it up and take people, rent it out and stuff, and that's when we got ready to move and move onto the ship. Our ship has 4 cabins and 3 heads. The heads are the bathrooms for you land lovers. And has a large main salon here, which is bigger than most boats, the whole thing. I got a couple of crew quarters in the front for, I have 2 engines in the boat, fridges, freezer, water maker, generators. I have a big 12-volt battery bank that we can run everything on. The generators, the air conditioning, and the freezers are cooled by seawater. Obviously, I don't have a radiator on my engines. I generate electricity from wind generators up in the riggings, and I also tow a propeller on a rod that spins as I go through the water, and that generates electricity. I have solar panels, and I have really high output alternators on my engines, and all those feed the battery bank that will feed all the lights and all the stuff that they use at night, and our pumps and everything. Or you just plug it in when you're at the dock. Our boat's a catamaran, which means that it has 2 hulls or 2 sides. I don't know if you can see it very well. You can't see it very well in this picture, but you can swim all the way from one end of the boat out the other, right through the middle. So catamarans, because they have a wide base, on 25-foot beam, the boat's not going to tip over when the wind pushes the sails. Now a monohull, what they have is a big old keel down there that weighs several tons, then that's what keeps it upright. So catamarans are lighter. If I got a hole in one side, if I ran into a sunken container or something, I think she'd just settle down in the water. I don't think she'd really sink. The other hull would kind of hold it up anyway. But because I don't have any ballast or a really big keel, then I probably won't sink as fast or faster. Hopefully I don't sink. I haven't tried it yet. But, the other thing is about a catamaran is it doesn't heel over. It doesn't, like sailboats do when the boat, there's a downside to that too, that I'll tell you about. But anyway, it won't spill. If a big puff of wind comes, then it won't tip over and spill the wind. It just makes you go faster, and if you're not careful, then it's going to shove the mast down through the middle of your boat. But it doesn't heel over, so you don't get as seasick on these, unless you have to go down into the engine room where it's hot and a lot of diesel, and then I feed the fish. So we don't have to mow the lawn, but we do have to go to the boatyard every 3 years and paint the bottom, and the kids aren't never too excited about that. They're kind of like, I can send them out for scraps somewhere. We just before Hurricane Irma, we hauled the boat out and did the bottom. I wrote my kids, asked them who wanted to come help, and nobody answered except for one daughter said, well, I'll pour some sand in my eyes just to make you feel better, but I can't come down and do it. And that was about all the help I got. So way back in 2000, we had to, we sold our house and the little place that we lived on, and it really was, I think the biggest thing was the barns. They had collected so much stuff, it took us 2 years of sales and trips to DI to get rid of it, so don't fill up your barn. But we sold everything that we had and everything that we needed, and moved on to the boat. Oops. Can't see my stuff here. When we first left, we went out. The Bahamas is a great place to start sailing. It's not that far from Florida. We would put out to sea at night about 6 o'clock, and as soon as you get out to sea, the kids are all excited, running on, falling off and everything, and then they get tired, and it just puts them right to sleep, and they just clunk. And the next thing you know, we're in the Bahamas about 6 in the morning, and they get up and they look out and go, oh man, you can see it looks like it's about 15 feet deep, and it was really about 50 feet deep. The water in the Bahamas is beautiful, and there's some amazing places to go over there. A lot of them you can't, you'll never see them unless you're on a boat like this, on a little sailboat. And you can read about them with John Steinbeck, but it's just a beautiful place. When we go over, we never left anything behind because it's our home. And I think part of the mystique of sailing, at least for some men, is the self-reliance part of it. You can't see the shore once you're 12 miles out. Then that's it. You can't see the buildings or anything else, and there's no one out there. The radios, unless it's the ham radios or the high-frequency radios, are only line of sight, so it's just you out there. And so you have your water systems, your electrical systems, your sailing rigging, and all that stuff, and you're totally self-reliant, you hope. You hope you have a good first mate who brought some good food. And we took our 2-year supply with us and lived off it for the first 2 years, and I'll never eat that stuff again. That was terrible. But anyway, it was, the other thing that's cool is that, you can harness the wind. You harness this energy and it turns it into electricity, and you move your boat, and you don't have to worry about fuel, depending on how good of a sailor you are. And, at night we can sit there and watch videos, Master and Commander, or Gilligan's Island. One of the other, Gilligan's Island is probably more apropos for what we did here. Down towards the bottom of the Bahamas, up there in that picture of that harbor, is Georgetown. And we also called that Chicken Harbor because That's as far as most sailors would go. Beyond that, there's kind of remote islands at the bottom of the Bahamas, and then there's the Turks and Caicos, and then you go down to Hispaniola, which is Dominican Republic and Haiti. So that's about as far as they go. And typically, the water in the Bahamas is kind of shallow, so as you can see, everyone kind of throws the anchor out in their channels, and they have what's called a Bahamian mooring, where you throw an anchor out on both ends. I don't know why they call it after the Bahamas, but then when the tide's going in and out, you don't get grounded. You know, when we left here and went down to the Turks and Caicos, I mean, we're really not that far from Florida, but it was just unimaginable beauty. When we sailed into the Caicos Islands, we sailed into someplace, we weren't really sure where it was, but in North Caicos, and there were some mooring balls out there, and we jumped in, and the water was just so clear and so full of fish, and there was a drop-off, and just a drop-off. You didn't know where it was going. And so my wife and I were out scuba diving one day, and I started just tumbling, because it felt like you were just falling. And first thing I knew, we were down 80, 90 feet. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw something go by, and my first thought was, holy cow, what are trains doing down here? I thought, oh, it probably wasn't a train. And I looked, and it was a whale going by. And all you did was you felt the water kind of push you back like this, and you saw this big thing go by, and an eye, and then this calf came along. You know, the whales can't see in front of them. So ever since then, I kind of pictured myself like this on the front of the whale, heading down to Antarctica, because I didn't see it coming, or obviously I didn't hear it coming. But it's a different world. It really is a different world, and there's just so much, and it's just not that far away. You don't have to go anywhere else. The Caribbean, in fact, there's lots for your lifetime by the time you go around there. My parents were on a mission down in Jamaica when we were going by, so we thought, well, we'd stop and see them for a while. And we sailed into Port Antonio, which is in the northeast corner, and it was a culture shock moving into Jamaica. Once we learned to understand their language, which is really English, but it was really patois, which is not English, but kind of English. And then it made it a little bit easier. We were still homeschooling, we were boat schooling, I suppose. And the kids got better and better at doing their homework faster and faster, so they could get off the boat and go play around. My children, my one son, I remember he was like, gosh, Dad, I didn't get a diploma. I said, well, don't worry. And so anyway, he and his wife are in medical school now, and he was in the top of his class, and I don't think it hurt him too bad, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. This little branch was interesting that we came to really love those people. They had a shortage of leadership. They didn't have anyone to be the branch president, so we went off into the bush and found this new convert who was just brand new. And, thank you. And pulled him out of the bush and made him into the branch president. I'll just tell you something really short. One day we were in church and sacrament meeting, and this beggar was walking by in just rags, and I kind of saw him. I was sitting on a stand, and kind of like came in the door and kind of started. He saw the bread on the table, and kind of like going around the table and towards the table. And then this new branch president, he just had enough of it, man. He just stood up and started yelling at this guy and pointing his fist at him, and he chased him out the door. And he's just yelling and cursing him and everything. They started picking up rocks and throwing them at him. And I tried to say, President, we don't really do that very much if someone's coming to church. But anyway, they were good people, and it's a hard life down there. Jamaica seems to have an upper class and that's very small, and middle class is very small, and then there's everybody else. I managed, this was one of the marinas I managed, and one night I came out to turn the power off these docks, and when I turned it off, the whole village lights went off. Turned it back on, they all went on, and then I figured out where all the water was going, because that was the only water supply, and it is a tough, really tough place to live. While I was in Port Authority, asked me to help him build this new marina. And he said, Tracy, in the meantime, why don't you go live on Navy Island and watch the island for me? I said, oh, okay. And it's this beautiful 56-acre island. It's way up there in the corner, in the top left-hand corner, that used to be called Lynch's Island back in the 1600s when the English had it. And they didn't want anyone coming down the channel, so there's cannons all over underneath the bush down there. And the rumor was that Errol Flynn won it in a card game, which isn't true, but it sounds good. And he made this island into the watering hole, the party place of Hollywood in the 1940s. I don't know if you know who Errol Flynn, he was the first big Robin Hood actor. Huge in the 40s. He was the man, Errol Flynn. And his wife was still there when we were there, but he had collected all different kinds of species of plants and bushes, and the avocados and the coconuts on this island were just unbelievable. So all the Prows kids were running around like Smith Family Robinson kids out there all over this island, and we spent a long time there. You know, and at the time, I didn't realize how good it was. I mean, in the whole Caribbean, there's not a more beautiful island than this. And I just thought to myself, you know, sometimes you can be in paradise and you can be doing this stuff, and you're so just involved in living and getting some food and everything. The only thing in the grocery store, and this is true, in Port Antonio was the tongues and the hoofs and part of the guts. And the tail, because we had tails. That's all. I don't know where the rest of the cows go, but that's all was in the stores there, and it was rugged, I'll tell you. Anyway, this is where Captain Bligh came back on his second trip after the mutiny, and he brought the breadfruit, which is a fruit about that big that grows on the trees, and it tastes like, you throw it in the fire, and it tastes like potatoes. And so that's where Navy Island, that's where we lived for a while. Then we moved into the marina. There's the marina that we built. You can see the different sizes of the boats there. The Leona is right behind on the left there. And so we started to get these nice boats coming in. That was the whole idea. There was a customs officer down there that, well, I was kind of a target anyway, because I kind of had to control the locals. So I had a bullseye on my back all the time, but this customs guy kept trying to extort money out of me, and I said no. And when I imported stuff, I needed a customs agent, so they thought they could ask for anything they want. So one day he came out to the boat and said, my parents remember this, he said, "Can you come with me for a little while?" And I came with him, and he threw me in jail. And it was a holiday weekend, and I had, great, you know, I didn't call anyone, nobody knew where I was. He was just trying to punish me. So the jail's this little cement thing, and there's like 4 big rooms in, and they're like 10 by 20. And so I'm walking in there, and he opens the door, and there's all these guys in there, and they threw me in and shut the door, and I couldn't see a thing. And I did see that there was just a concrete floor in there, and a bucket in the corner. And so I'm there, and they shut the door, and it's dark, and I'm like, oh man, I gotta get next to a wall here, because there's murderers and rapists and crazy guys and everybody in there, a lot of drug guys. And I'm going around to the wall, and I keep thinking to myself, man, don't kick the bucket, or you'll really be in problems. Either bucket. And I didn't know what was going to happen. Then it was all dark, and they had welded plates of steel onto the bars, so this place was completely dark and sweltering hot. there's some holes in there, and the guys were trying to breathe through the holes. So anyway, in the middle of the night, there was a drug kingpin in there, and he gave me a little real estate. So he said, "You can sit here, white man." And I said, "Okay, thanks." And he said, "But I need some help getting out of here." And I said, "Oh, no problem." And so it's still dark all the time, and I really couldn't see anyone, what was going on. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, like about 2 o'clock in the morning, he pulls out a match. Now, nobody had anything in there except for a cut-off plastic bottle for some water. But he pulls out a match and a candle. I thought, oh, man. And then he pulls out this big old long stiletto switchblade. I thought, man, that's it. I am going to kick the bucket right now. And I'm going, holy cow, the light was going on. And then the door opened, and then I thought, oh man, this cop's going to come in and save me. And instead he throws a garbage bag full of something into the room. I'm going, man, he just threw his garbage in here. But the kingpin comes in and gets it, and he opens it up, and it's full of marijuana, and he grabs it, and he grabs his knife and starts cutting it up and wrapping it up and selling it to everybody. So everybody in the whole jail was smoking marijuana there, and so you couldn't even see. You couldn't breathe before, and then you couldn't even breathe now. I didn't have any money to buy any, but I didn't need any either, because it was just right there. So I figured that was like, another great experience in Jamaica. So, I don't know, but luckily there were some members that we knew that working at the American Embassy, and he sprung me out of there, and that was the last I ever heard of it. And sometimes these journeys take us into places that we don't really want to be, and we don't know where they're going. And that's the nature of the journey, and that's the nature of our lives, really, isn't it? I mean, we didn't know what we were going to head into when we decided to come down here. And we have to kind of be prepared for that and accept it, and it's okay, and then things work out. But I think that's the risk of a fallen world. And whether our journeys are here or wherever, we're going to, when we come across those. Sometimes I would take some American guys or English Europeans up to Cuba. And the Cubans really loved to have us. They would take our passport and put a yellow Post-it note in there and stamp that instead of my passport, so I didn't go back to the States with a Cuban stamp in it. And they were so poor. They were so poor, but they were so kind. There wasn't really restaurants there, but someone would kind of stand by their house, and then you'd go into their house and they'd feed you, and it was nice. That's their bus, this truck. That's the bus system. They were really worried about Americans invading them all the time. Really worried about it. You can't go here because that's where we shot down one of your spy planes, and we never know when you guys are going to invade us again. But I never heard him talk negative about Fidel Castro or their government. One thing they told me was that when I was down there, that doctors and lawyers had a cap on their salaries of $25 a month, and I thought that was a really good idea. And they were good doctors too. They stitched you up well. It was like a time warp, though. You go there and everything's out of the 50s. I mean, it's not just the cars, the way they dress, and at night they come out into the little town square, and they have these old instruments that are just about worn out, and they play these old songs, and they play the Cuban music, and they talk so fast you can never understand them. But they were really kind people. If you have a chance to go to Cuba before it gets killed by capitalism, it's a good idea. It's a beautiful place. One day I was in my marina office, and I have a radio on, and probably no one else does. You know what they do when a fisherman doesn't come back at night in Jamaica? Nothing. And most of them can't even swim. They just well, this guy never came back. Anyway, I heard this Mayday call, and it was down the shore from me, and it was some Italians with almost a brand new boat on their maiden voyage from Italy. They said, oh, where's thinking, can you come on the boat? I said, you kidding me? But I went and helped them. And so when I got there, they had one anchor out to keep them from going farther in the shore, and they were right on top of this beautiful reef, and their boat was going up, and the surf started coming in, and then it would go down, and it would crash there, and I looked in there, and I saw the bottom of the boat kind of going up like that every time it would crash down. So I said, get ready and put up the sails, and we're going to heel the boat over, and then we're going to get you off, and then I cut the anchor line. We didn't go anywhere. But I did ask the policemen to come over. The only drug boats they have are old drug boats, with like 5 engines on them and gas tanks, and that's all. Anyway, so I hooked up the line to them, and I said, go, pull, and they pulled, and then all of a sudden we started moving, and I looked behind me, and there's this big blue thing in the water. And it was the keel. The keel on this is about 10 tons. I'll show you a picture of it. And we went out a little bit further, and I kept saying, go to the shore, and they stopped and said, huh? And we turned over and sunk. So now we're there, and first thing you know, everyone's coming to strip the boat, and first thing I do is hire a Jamaican with a big old machete to guard the boat, and it was insanity. And we tried to help these people, and my boys and I called their insurance company and got the rights to the salvage. So my boys and I demasted and de-rigged the boat underwater. And then we could turn it over, and we started to bring it up with airbags that we brought it up with. And then we put pumps on it and got some tarps underneath it and so forth. And it took several days to do it. And then we towed around through some of the deepest waters in the Caribbean, not knowing if it was going to sink. And I ran off into a boatyard that we had just made in the marina. And we couldn't get any cranes in there, so we put these big they're actually beams off a boat. They were yard arms. And we'd lift it up 2 inches at a time to get it up there. And we'd block it up with just the blocks that we had. And as you can see, I formed up, the keel was torn off. That's the keel as it came off the reef. It's solid lead. It's about 10 tons, and it was really hard to get it off the keel because it was right on the reef where the water breaks, and the water was only that deep, about 6 feet deep. So how do you get that off the keel in the middle of the water? And one of the royal families of Austria had a villa right above there, and I was worried that, when you become the salvor of a ship, you're totally responsible for everything. So I had a chunk of lead out there on the keel, and it took me several months to get it off. And so we laid layer and layer off the boat. That's all carbon fiber down there. That's the boat after I stripped it out. And that's the boat when it was done. It took us about a year to do. And that's SOA Blue. That's all the way from Italy. So I had to bring the boat back to the States. And there was a big storm going on, and I never sail with an agenda. Otherwise, you have to go when the weather's not all that great. But we did anyway. So there's a big storm coming down down from the east. So we tried to go to the east, and we couldn't go to the east. We had some engine problems because the engine was submerged. The valve springs would rust and break. But we got them fixed. I just gave one to a Jamaican, and he went out and found one. I haven't, to this day, know whose car it came out of, but he came back with a valve spring. And as soon as we left the shores of Jamaica, we couldn't go east, so we had to go west. And, going west from Jamaica, you had to go across the Gulf of Cuba, and the closest thing is basically Mexico, Cancun area. So we just barely just barely past Ocho Rios, and the engine dies again. And then I had no more valve springs or anything. So here we are, we're kind of in a storm, we're like blowing downwind, there's these huge set waves, and there's no place really to stop. We didn't have engines or anything. And all you could hear at night was these waves coming up behind you, and they'd start hissing. And then you could hear them. And you had to steer the ship down so that when it goes down these waves, it started going really fast. But if you got turned sideways, it was like water skiing on a huge boat. And if you get sideways, you know what happens, It's just like, you call it broaching. And it'll roll the boat. So I'm down there sleeping one night, and Isaac's steering. That's Isaac there. And he's steering, and I'm sleeping in the fore cabin, and all of a sudden I go flying across, hit the other side, and I got knocked down. And so we had to tow all our fuel tanks behind us to slow us down so the waves would pass us up. And it slowed us down a little bit, so I didn't get to Cancun when I thought I would. This is a picture when we were just heading into Cancun. One of the sails is tangled up there, and we're going in at night, and you can see that storm on the left coming in. And you're going, oh, this isn't good. Because the seas started to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so when we got by Cancun, by then it was dark. And it was not only dark, but the waves were big, and so the navigation lights, the seas were up above the navigation lights, so you couldn't see the navigation lights. And they're not all that great down there anyway, believe me. And we're going in there, and no engine, and I kind of knew the area, and we didn't have the good maps that we have now. And you know what I started thinking about? You know this hymn, right? Whoever wrote this was really a sailor, I'm telling you. When it says, when at last I near the shore and the fearful breakers roar. And when you hear those breakers, it puts the fear of you know what in you. Because when you're out at sea, you're not going to run into anything, but if you can't see the land, you can't see the breakers, all you can do is hear them, And when you're in a storm, you're so busy steering, and you got all these things going on at the same time, and it's hard to even send, Isaac out to the bow of the boat to see what he can see, because we had to tie on. If you come off the boat in the middle of the sea, then you're all over. There's no way you can stop and find anyone. But that's why sailors are a little bit religious, and sometimes really religious. I don't know who they worship, but it is true out there. There is no, and it reminds me of life in a lot of ways. When we get in these scary experiences, there isn't man out there showing us where to go, and there's not lights to show us where to go other than the light from above. I threw out the anchor. I finally said, okay, stop right here. We threw out the anchor, we stopped. The next morning I dove down, and I looked at the anchor, and right in front of me was a massive boulders. And on the map you can see it. There's just a pile of rocks right in the middle of the harbor there. And we stopped maybe 10 yards in front of it. If we would have kept going, we would have hit them. There's another thing about that. When you're coming into a harbor, where the river comes out of the land and it goes out to the sea, then it will dump its dirt right there, and it'll make what they call a bar. Okay? So when the waves come in, they'll hit the bar. So when sailors coming in, when you come in, now, and that bottom picture over there is exactly what it looks like. You're totally beat up, and you've been at sea for a long time, and you know that there's the harbor there, but there's a shallow bar that you have to go over. And you just, what it takes, the nerve to go over that bar, because you kind of have to surf the waves over. I mean, and you can surf them and go down. I mean, look at that boat. This is a harbor in New Zealand, and this guy's going out from the breakwater, and the waves start to really get, not only that, the water that's coming down the river goes against the surf, and it causes what's called rage. And that is the bar. The people who wrote these hymns know what they're talking about. At least if you're in a catamaran, you won't tip over when you hit the bar. Okay, I'm running out of time. So, one other hymn I was going to tell you about. There's a thing called a range, and it has an upper light and a lower light. Now, if you can only see the upper light, if you take 2 points, and one in front of the other, if they're exactly lined up, you're in a straight line, right? And you're going down into the harbor in the channel. If you're over to the side, then one's going to look over to the side or this way. You've got to be right there, and then it'll take you right down the channel. Okay? So if the upper light and the lower light are both there, and then you know where your channel is, or a thing. Without the lower light, you can't do it. Okay? And same with our lives. The upper light's the Lord, and He's up there with the light. But we have other people down here, other aids to navigation down here. And if you get them both in line, you're going down the channel, and you've got deep water, and you're not going to wipe out. So, these are my children. You might wonder what they thought about it with their crazy dad.
I think the biggest lesson that I took out from my growing up experiences was just really, like, if I wanted to do something, I could do it. Like, I've never had anything in my life where I'm like, well, I don't think I could ever do that. You know? Like it's helped me in my school and my mission and everything. It's definitely influenced the rest of my life. And I definitely hope to do something similar with my family. I would definitely say that growing up in the Caribbean and in South Florida definitely gave me a greater appreciation for different cultures. I've also been able to travel on this side as well, and that definitely added to it. But I just came to know that no matter what your skin color is or how you grew up, you can, I don't know, everybody's the same. So.
I'd say the biggest thing I learned from it is, after having my own family, is how courageous and just, I almost irresponsible I felt like that they might have been. And how to follow your dreams, you have to be a little bit responsible. You can't wait until the job's perfect, or you're retired, or you have money and stuff like that. Like, you just gotta go for it. And after having my own family, I can see how difficult it must have been for them to move and just go for it.
As I look back overall on the experience in my childhood, I certainly have a lot of fond memories. There were a lot of difficulties about the lifestyle that we chose to live as well, but overall I wouldn't trade it for anything. I think that I had incredible opportunities to meet people from all over the world, to see things that most people don't get to see at that age. Where I am.
Sorry, Isaac. There they are. I'm going to have to cut him short there. So, my point being that hard is not always bad and difficult. I think, we as people and our kids can get over it. I think we need to kind of look and see where our journey is taking us. It's really hard to get out of a nice, comfortable home, and sometimes we don't take opportunities that we can, but when we take them, we get the blessings from them. There is so much to do in this life. I don't know about you, but I have a lot that I still want to do. The analogy of our voyage through sea and through life is really uncanny. President Monson talks about it all the time. You know his story about the Bismarck ship that got the brothers stuck. And I don't think that there's anywhere in the world that people are invited to think big more so than here at BYU and in the LDS Church. I mean, we talk about kingdoms, thrones, principalities, powers, dominions, and so forth. Wow, talk about opportunities for a really great, living big voyage. And, makes you wonder how big you can think. Again, I have to tell you, if you had 5 years, what can you do in 5 years? Can you live like you might die in 5 years? It might not be a bad idea. My oncologist told me that it takes 10 years from a cancer cell to a tumor. So assuming that none of you have tumors in your body, you've got at least 10 years. So go for it. We should go out and take the experiences we can, take some chances, not foolish chances. Follow our passions, our good passions. And what we get on this life, those experiences, is the only thing that's going to go with us. It's not our wealth, it's not our retirements, as you know. Don't wait till you're older to do these things, because it's harder to do them. I used to have 5 crews that I could have steer, and then I could kind of sleep. Because I would put 3 of my kids on there, on each one. But going just my wife and I now in the same place, no way. I mean, not that I don't want to be with you, babe, but I don't want to steer off and on. So we should live it up, sing the songs that we can while we can. You know, it was 20 years ago that we left and we threw out the lines. And I'll never catch up to you and your careers and your whatever you've been doing in the last 20 years, but I don't regret it. I'm happy for the experiences that I've had. And, you know, one of the first things when he said, you might die on the table, I thought, I'm glad I have a little bit in my bucket anyway, before I kick the bucket. And I value those experiences, and I'm grateful for them. Sailors always say goodbye to each other by saying, fair winds and following seas, and may your jib always pull. And I say this, I'm grateful to be here today. Thank you very much.